Hello. So we're going to be having a look at FM in Vital today. Some of the cool stuff you can do with it. You can do some really cool and weird FM stuff in Vital. Just before I start, it's kind of a windy day, windy Irish day here. So if you hear that in the background, don't worry, I'm quite safe. So to begin, we're just going to have a quick look at some basic FM stuff first, just concepts of how you get different kind of sounds out of FM, and then we'll look at some cool Vital specific stuff that you can do. So FM. FM is when we're taking one oscillator and using it to modulate another oscillator. FM stands for frequency modulation, but generally the way it's done is by modulating the phase, because that's what the DX7 did, which is the most famous FM synth that you've probably heard tens of thousands of patches on in pop songs. So let's just have a quick look at the way that you set up FM to get different sounds out of it. So here in Vital I've got a sine wave here, very basic shape. Then I've got this here set to the FM from oscillator 2. That will FM from oscillator 2 if we turn it on. And we also want to make sure that it's turned down so that we don't also hear that oscillator. So it makes that kind of a sound. So what it's doing is it's going through the phase here and it's modulating really, really fast with the oscillator and it's changing the sound. It's basically, making it more interesting, have more harmonics and whatnot. So how do you get decent sounds out of this that don't just sound like that? Well, first of all, we might want to change the way in which the oscillator is modulating the other oscillator. Instead of just being on all the time when we've got this up, maybe we would like to control it with an envelope here, and let's just have it create sort of a pluck kind of a sound. Maybe not as extreme as that. So now we've got something we could use as a bass. Got a little kind of attack there. So what else can we do? Well, if we change the relationship between the two oscillators, we're going to get a significantly different sound. So generally, if you're leaving it at like octave intervals, it's going to sound pretty pleasing. And then if you use inharmonic intervals or kind of weird, so instead of doing an octave here, we might do 17 because we're crazy, or we'll go up here to like 45. So the kind of more off it is, the more metallic it's going to sound. So generally this is the kind of technique that you'll use to create sort of bell type sounds. So let's bring this down to like 6 here, right? And let's bring the modulation down a lot. So you can hear when we're off, we get this kind of atonal-ish kind of bell attack here. And let's just bring up the release here. And maybe on the modulating oscillator here, let's keep the sustain. Let's increase that decay. So now we got a bell sounding kind of thing. And you can play around with where exactly you've got the pitch. So up high, it's going to have a kind of ringier kind of a sound. Then lower, it's going to be kind of duller. So generally, to get more interesting sounds out of FM, you want to be modulating one oscillator by a kind of more complicated oscillator or by a couple of them. So what you can do in Vital is we could say take this oscillator that's modulating here and we can FM that by another oscillator. So let's use another sine wave. And now you can hear we're getting a much more timbrally interesting sound. Now, let's not FM it that much. Let's bring it down a touch so you can hear the difference. And let's make this one an inharmonic interval of the first one. Let's bring that down. And then let's bring this one up a bit. And let's change that decay up just a touch. And bring this down. So now you can hear we're getting into kind of really belly territory. So let's add like a delay and a reverb to that. So it's a good way of making cool, kind of belly sort of pluck sounds. So now you can see we've kind of got inharmonic intervals set up here, and we've got a really belly kind of a sound. And obviously the more that we modulate the second oscillator here, which is modulating the first oscillator, the kind of sharper the sound's going to be. And the more kind of simple or duller it's going to be if we modulate it less. And it's the same here with the second oscillator that's modulating the first oscillator. You can be really subtle with it. Or you can be really harsh and get really harsh sounds, which we probably don't always want. So you can tell from kind of that sound example there that the way that you get different sounds out of it, it's kind of subtle changes make a big difference. So FM is mostly, I suppose, known for bells, but you can do a lot of other cool stuff with it. So another thing that you might want to do is you might want to slightly offset the pitch in terms of fine-tuning from each other. And this has the effect of kind of giving the sound some motion, because the small tuning disparities are causing the oscillators to kind of phase cancel each other a little bit. And it's, if you can hear there in the tail, you're getting some movement in it. The other thing that's going to make a big difference is the way we've got the envelope set up. So right now we've got the envelope set up where it's kind of a plucky kind of a sound. But obviously we can set up a different kind of an envelope. So instead of that, let's go for more of a pad. So let's bring this decay way out, and let's also increase the release, and maybe let's add a couple of unison voices here. Now that's a little bit extreme, so let's pull that down. So here I've gone for more of a pleasing kind of an interval, so I'm using an octave instead of using some weird one, and then I'm using a fifth above that octave to modulate that. So we're getting kind of a less metallic, slightly easier on the ears kind of sound. And then you can notice if I change this up to be something crazy, like let's go to 15 here, we're going to get a really abrasive sort of sound, which you may want. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of how FM comes together to make a sound in terms of using really simple wave shapes. Okay, so I've just got a reset here. So it's just a sine wave modulating a sine wave. Another thing that you might want to have a look at is, instead of using another oscillator to FM this oscillator to make it more complex, you might want to just go in and edit this oscillator to make it more complex. So here we've got a sine wave, but if we add in some extra harmonics, let's go for a couple weird ones up here. Let's go for some really high-pitched ones up here, make it kind of noisy. And then down here at the bottom, let's get some action going on down here. So now we've got a more complex oscillator here. Let's give it a bit more noise up the top. So now we've got a much more complex oscillator, and this is going to sound really different to a sine wave. And you may notice that these kind of wave shapes are the way that we get those kind of cheesy, now 2012 dubstep basses. A lot of them are made like that. So you can still obviously take this now complex oscillator and modulate it by your third oscillator here, and that will indeed make it more complicated. Let's have it not be a saw wave here. Let's switch it up to, let's just use a sine. Okay, so now we've got the sine. Sweet. Okay, now the way that these oscillators are set up against each other matters a lot too. So let's bring this up an octave. Now you can see it's much sharper. We bring it back down to the zero here. By the way, I'm not doing it, but just in case, you can hold shift and you can jump an octave values. For some reason I'm not doing that, but you can. So It's kind of much squelchier when we're down here. And then if we go, let's go just an octave down. The other thing that's particularly good for FM sounds is some of these spectral shaping modes here. Particularly some of the weirder ones like smear. You can kind of get drastically different sounds. And let's look at this other one, which is random amplitudes, which is going to take what we've drawn in here and kind of randomize the amplitudes of the different partials that we drew in. So you can use this to get really sharp, abrasive kind of sounds. So I've just set up another example here without using another oscillator. So I'm using this randomized amp spectral morpher here, and you can hear you can get quite a complex sound out of just a simple oscillator, and then you can dramatically change the sound. Depending on which setting you're at, and you can also, you know, move through these modes and you'll get some pretty cool results. Like, but for now, let's just stick with the random amplitudes here. And of course, you can make it more metallic if we go to a weirder interval. And these concept works for basses and stuff as well. I'm just showing it as an example here with the kind of a bell sound. Another thing that people don't often talk about when they do FM tutorials that I just want to cover quickly is how expressive FM can be. So a lot of the time what you want to do is you want to take these FM amounts and you want to change the way they're playing based on how you're hitting your keyboard and stuff. And a lot of people who are beginning in sound design maybe don't know that. So if you know, sometimes you might want the FM amount to decrease as you move up the keyboard. So you get kind of a harsher sound down low. And then as you move up, to prevent it getting really harsh in the high frequencies, you just bring the FM amount down. And then when you get to the very top, it's a really kind of a gentle sort of a sound. The other thing you might want to do is you might want to vary how it reacts to velocity. So at really hard velocities, maybe not that much, you might want it to be quite bright, and then as you hit at lower and lower velocities, it kind of darkens. So that's just a good way of getting more, I suppose, expressiveness out of an FM patch. So that's pretty much the basics of how you might do FM in Vital here. So let's just start from an init patch, and I'm going to show you some cool stuff that Vital can do. So I have some sound examples here of me using the LFOs here as FM modulators as well. Let me just take you through it, and then I'll show you some of the sound examples that I have. So if we set this to a let's just use a sine again, actually. So we can take the LFO here and we can attach it to the phase. And by the way, when you're holding over to drag something on, if you hold control, that will make it bipolar modulation. So now if we go into the matrix over here, you can see it moves both ways. And you can hear what we're doing now is we're modulating the phase, but you can hear the tuning is slightly changing. And that's really how we're getting the FM effect. Now if we set our LFO here to be key tracked, we've got FM. So let's bring that down maybe. So you got a bunch of extra oscillators here that you can use to FM. Each of these LFOs can be modulating, you know, say oscillator 2 or oscillator 3 that are then modulating the main oscillator or each other or whatever. And it's a good way of complicating up your sounds. Now, there are a couple of things to be mindful of when you use the LFO. It is not band limited in the same way that the oscillators are. So you're going to run into some at higher pitches. You're going to be hitting Nyquist and you're going to get some aliasing. Now, let me just... Can you hear that coming through? There's kind of a... There's like a kind of extra sound in the background, which is basically the frequencies being pushed back down because it's getting too high. So at really high frequencies, unless you're doing something crazy, you probably want to be careful with the amount that you're modulating stuff, because you will get some of that aliasing, which can be not so good. But let's just go down a bit. And you still have full control over this, so let's bring down that smoothing. So you can change up the shape of this, and it's going to have a pretty significant impact on what's happening. You could also, this is the phase for the LFO. You could take another LFO and you could phase modulate this. So let's set this one to key track as well. Another cool thing we can do with the LFOs here is when we are modulating the phase, we can mess with the stereo button, which will change the amount that it's being FM'd in each ear. So you can hear if it's in the center here, it just sounds kind of normal. Let's spice this up a bit. Okay, so now if I move the stereo, you can hear we're getting some stereo widening because we're FMing it differently on each ear. The other thing you can do if you want to be really crazy is you can take, say, LFO2 here, and we could use this to modulate the frequency. Let's not modulate that much. And then we can set, say, LFO2 here to be stereo. And let's speed that up a bit. And now you're getting kind of stereo tuning on each side as well. Let's keep that a bit slower and let's make it a bit more subtle. Now that's kind of abrasive, but let's bring down... Let's just set this to what it starts at. And now we can bring down the modulation in here. And let's smooth it up a bit so it's not as harsh. So yeah, there's some cool stuff that you can do there with the LFOs as frequency modulators. I just wanted to show you a couple examples of using the LFO as a FM modulator. So I've got this sound here, just a keys kind of a sound. And what I've got happening here is I've just got this LFO, which is frequency modulating the main oscillator here, as you can see. I've got this one, which is just messing with the wavetable a little bit. And it's both of these are set to stereo, so they're doing some stereo stuff. And then finally, I've got this LFO set to the pitch of the LFO that's doing the frequency modulation. So it's set to the frequency over here. And it's just modulating that a little bit in stereo as well, just to give it some width. So we're getting a whole lot of width out of just using the oscillators to kind of change up the main oscillator here. So another example I have here is this lead sound. So this is the same thing. This is just an LFO basically modulating the phase, and it's doing some stereo width, and I'm kind of stereo modulating the pitch of that as well, and it just gives a kind of a nice wide lead sound. and then that's going through some reverb and delay. So the final example I want to show you is a bit of a more extreme case. I just put together this bass sound just to show off, I suppose, some of the stuff you can do with the LFOs and FM in stereo. So this is essentially the exact same technique as all of the other stuff. So I've got this LFO set up here, and this LFO is frequency modulating the main oscillator here. And I've got some stuff going on where I've got this LFO is going to stuff that's happening in the effects. But the main crux of this again is just modulating the pitch over time in stereo. So I think the bottom one here, or is it this one? Yeah, this bottom one here is actually modulating the pitch in quite a wide interval. So if I slow this down, way down, what this is doing is I'm controlling about 2 octaves of this LFO that's modulating the main oscillator, and this is basically changing its pitch over time. So if I change this around, you can hear the difference it has. So yeah, that's just a couple of ways of doing some interesting FM stuff with the LFOs and the oscillators in Vital. I hope that it's been helpful to you. If it has, I'm glad.